Okay, in this class, we're going to be talking about limitations on the right of publicity, the state law created right of publicity, specifically limitations on the right of publicity based in the First Amendment. So you'll see echoes of the fair use right under copyright here, but it's not exactly the same, or at least it might not be exactly the same. And perhaps part of the question we ought to be asking is why not, and should it be the same, perhaps? The only time the Supreme Court has heard a right of publicity case at all was in the context of a potential First Amendment exception. It was in the Zucchini v. Scripps-Howard case in 1977 involving a human cannonball named Hugo Zucchini, part of the flying zucchini family, who invented the flying cannonball show a long time ago. Italian family immigrated to the United States, and the family did these performances all around the country. And what happened was Hugo Zucchini, kind of the primary cannonball for the Zucchini family, had contracted to do a series of shows at the Geauga County Fair in Ohio, and the Scripps-Howard TV company showed up and made a videotape probably, of the entire performance, which they aired on the news. And Zucchini sued for a violation of the right of publicity on the ground that the television station had appropriated the economic value of his act by showing people everything that was going to take place. And there was a concern that, presumably people wouldn't show up to watch him perform if they'd already seen it on TV. And the TV company defended on First Amendment grounds, arguing that they had a right to report the news, that was First Amendment protected, and therefore they were entitled to show the act that was being performed at the fair, and they were telling people what was happening. And the question was, under Ohio law, did Zucchini have a claim, and if there was a claim, was that preempted by the First Amendment? The Ohio Supreme Court said yes. The Supreme Court was able to review on the ground that the decision was based on the First Amendment. So it was like, is there a First Amendment constitutional limitation on the state's ability to create rights of publicity that extend that far? And the Supreme Court said, no, the First Amendment did not prohibit the state of Ohio from protecting right of publicity claims under this particular circumstance, insofar as the television company had arguably usurped the entire economic value of Zucchini's performance. Now, query whether or not that's actually the case. Presumably Zucchini would have to prove that. But that was the conclusion of the court, that effectively, because there was an argument for usurping the entire economic value that was not protected by the First Amendment, the television companies could still broadcast, they just couldn't broadcast the entire act. Okay, fast forward many years later to the Cartoons v. MLB case. What happened here? In 1992-93, the company Cartoons, based in Oklahoma, created a series of, frankly, not very funny parody cards of Major League Baseball player cards, right? Creating parodies for all of the players, as well as a bunch of other kind of baseball-themed parody cards. And MLB brought a right of publicity action against them, arguing that they were improperly appropriating the names and likenesses of MLB players. Now, of course, they did not use their actual names. They used parody names, although it's very easy to figure out who they were. And they included disclaimers pointing out that these cards were not authorized and were intended as parody. The court reviewed under both the Lanham Act and the right of publicity claim, said, look, there's no Lanham Act problem here because no consumers are going to be confused that these cards are issued by Major League Baseball or somehow authorized by the players. The source of the cards is clear, and it's very clear that they're parodies of real baseball cards, especially because it says so explicitly on the card itself. Right? It says this is not authorized, and it's intended as a parody. As a consequence, the key question here is whether or not there's a right of publicity violation. The players say, yes, you're using our names and likenesses, or at least our likenesses, and by implication our names without our permission. The court says no, right? This is protected by the First Amendment. This is a parody. No one's going to be confused. And to the extent that there's an economic interest owned by the players here, it's not infringed upon by these cards. These cards are making fun of baseball cards, and that isn't what the right of publicity was intended to protect. So there's no reason to find a violation of the right here. The players are still able to vindicate all of the meaningful economic rights associated with the right of publicity, and this is deeply rooted in First Amendment free speech values, commenting upon and criticizing baseball players and the baseball card industry. Okay, in a slightly different, totally different really outcome, in Comedy 3 Productions v. Gary Satarup, what was the nature of the claim here? Well, Satarup is an artist. His art consists of creating sketches of different celebrities, which are then essentially turned into prints, which are distributed as both paper prints and on t-shirts. And among other things, he created a print of the Three Stooges. So he hand drew a picture of the Three Stooges, and went ahead and created a lithograph and t-shirts that you could purchase of the Three Stooges. And the holding company, Comedy 3 Productions, which owned the rights of publicity in the Three Stooges act as a whole, brought a right of publicity action against Satarup, arguing that he had improperly appropriated their likenesses in a commercial fashion. Satarup defended on First Amendment grounds, arguing that he had a right to create drawings of the Three Stooges, and the Supreme Court, or the California court, did an analysis effectively looking at the question in terms of more or less the fair use exception to copyright, kind of analogizing between the right of publicity and copyright for the purpose of the fair use question, and finding that Satarup's use under the circumstances was not a fair use because it was insufficiently transformative. Now, case has been heavily criticized. One reason for the court reaching this conclusion might be that Satarup was creating these prints and t-shirts in relatively large quantities and selling them commercially. Query what might have happened if he had done so in a more limited or even unique context, i.e. if he'd done a painting of the Three Stooges and sold only the one painting rather than reproductions, would that have changed the outcome? Nevertheless, under the circumstances, the California court analyzed what Satarup had done and said, we don't think that this falls within the scope of a First Amendment limitation on the right of publicity, implicitly because this is the kind of thing that the Three Stooges could be selling themselves.